CBS Evening News with Roger Mudd substituting for Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. Mao Zedong, the man who for 27 years ruled more than a fifth of the world's population, is dead. The 82-year-old chairman of the Chinese Communist Party died today at 10 minutes after midnight Peking time. Announcement of the death was delayed 16 hours, and when it was finally made, the nation of 837 million Chinese responded with an outpouring of grief. Cause of Mao's death was attributed by the government to the worsening of his illness, which, while never explained, was believed to be a combination of strokes and Parkinson's disease. Mao's death is expected to intensify the power struggle that broke into the open 9 months ago with the death of Premier Zhou Enlai. More on that story from Marvin Kalb at the State Department in Washington.
The prevailing view here is that Mao's death will have no immediate effect on Chinese foreign policy, meaning Peking's door will remain open to America for the time being, closed to Russia. But experts believe that his death will accelerate a power struggle that may in time change the direction of Chinese policy. Because of this vast uncertainty, President Ford and Secretary Kissinger conferred for most of the morning before making statements designed to accent the positive.
Americans will remember that it was under Chairman Mao that China moved together with the United States to end a generation of hostility and to launch a new and more positive era in relations between our two countries. I am confident that the trend of improved relations between the People's Republic of China and the United States, which Chairman Mao helped to create, will continue to contribute to world peace and stability.
I do not believe that Chinese policy is basically influenced by the personal likes and dislikes of Chinese leaders, but by their assessment of what is in the long-term interest of China. We have to remember, when a towering figure disappears from the scene, not even his successors can know exactly what the shape of events will be, and it is premature to speculate as to what the future evolution should be.
The consensus here seems to be that the power struggle began with Zhou Enlai's death last January. His heir apparent, Deng Xiaoping, a moderate, was all set to assume power when suddenly he vanished, and a campaign was launched against his policies. Hua Guofeng, clearly a compromise candidate, was then appointed prime minister as two groups competed for power. Moderates who stressed production and stability, and radicals who wanted a fresh emphasis upon revolution, both of these groups claiming fidelity to Mao's thoughts. This led to rioting, Peking now admitting armed struggle, railroad tie-ups, and sagging production. Experts feel that the key to power now rests with the Red Army, which Mao created and which may now determine the future direction of Mao's China without Mao. Marvin Kalb, CBS News, the State Department.
The Central Committee of the Soviet Communist Party today sent a telegram expressing deep condolences over the death of Mao, whom Moscow had condemned for more than 20 years as a traitor to communism. The message came from the Soviet Party's highest level, suggesting that Moscow is looking once again to establish friendly ties with Peking. In Taiwan, the nationalist Chinese broke into cheers when radio stations announced, "We have very good news to report. Mao Zedong, the bandit leader, is dead." In San Clemente, former President Nixon, who opened the way for renewed U.S.-Chinese relations, called Mao a totally dedicated and pragmatic communist, but he was also a visionary poet.
Betty Crocker introduces new Stir and Frost. The super moist cake is just the right size for times when a big cake is too much, like after school for the kids.
Just the right size for dessert.
Moist. New Stir and Frost is complete. Cake mix, frosting, 5x7 pan, and so convenient. Just add water, stir, and bake. The frosting's already made.
Just the right size for a family snack.
When a big cake is more than you need Stir and Frost. New from Betty Crocker.
1 ounce of Total gives you 100% of the recommended daily allowance of all these important vitamins and iron.
Yeah?
I'll pour this leading natural cereal. Stop me when you think the vitamin value equals totals.
Okay. No.
Not yet.
Stop.
Nope.
This is unreal.
It takes at least 16 ounces of any of the leading natural cereals to equal the vitamins in 1 ounce of fortified total.
Wow, what a difference.
That's the total difference.
Mao's body will lie in state in Peking's Great Hall of the People for 1 week, beginning on Saturday. A week from then, at exactly 3 in the afternoon Peking time, all Chinese, wherever they are on the mainland, have been instructed to stand at attention for 3 minutes in silent tribute. The new China news agency said no foreign governments would be invited to send representatives to the morning ceremonies. Mao's 82 years spanned one of the most stormy periods in Chinese history, and his life was as turbulent as the revolution he led. Richard C. Hotlett reports.
Mao Zedong in 1969, as he will be remembered in history, among the most powerful leaders of his time. This 9th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party followed the Cultural Revolution, whose purpose was to achieve immortality for Mao's revolutionary dream. In one measure at least, that immortality is his. The theory and practice of communism must now and forever be discussed in terms of Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism. He was born in Hunan province, an area of China known for its bandit heroes and for a tradition of peasant rebellion. Mao, the son of peasants, rebelled early against what he later described as his father's tyranny over his family and farm workers. He left home to study, at one time working in a laundry while he considered careers as a policeman, soap maker, lawyer, and teacher. He would become a revolutionary, a guerrilla, strategist, a poet, a prophet of change. Mao, like other Chinese patriots, cried out against the poverty and foreign domination that gripped China. He organized students and workers and, in 1921, helped form the Chinese Communist Party. An early alliance with the Nationalist Party of Chiang Kai-shek ended abruptly in 1927 when nationalist troops attacked the communists in Shanghai. Mao's retreat from Chiang's attack in 1934 was one of history's most remarkable exploits, the year-long, 6,000-mile-long march to Yan'an. Barely 1 in 10 survived, about 8,000 troops and party workers. For 12 years, virtually isolated and with no outside help, Mao formulated social and economic programs designed to end the traditional role of landlords and local officials. Mao also trained an army equipped with its own ideology and guerrilla tactics. It was during this time that Mao also did his most important writing, his theme, A Socialist and Independent China. Western visitors described him as a man of intellectual depth and peasant shrewdness, an idealist capable of ruthless decision. He married Zhang Jing, an actress. It was his 3rd marriage. Communists and nationalists continued to fight each other, but by 1937, all China faced a common enemy, Japan. Much of the communists' later success was due to their ability to arouse and mobilize Chinese nationalism in the war against Japan. At war's end in 1945, Mao and Chiang Kai-shek met for the first time in 20 years. It was also the last time. 1 year later, the inevitable solution to their rivalry, civil war, the climax of a bitter struggle in which millions were killed by both sides. Not even Mao Zedong had expected so quick or so stunning a victory. The nationalists had gone to war with a bigger, better-equipped army, but had lost popular support. By 1948, Zhang and his followers were leaving China for Taiwan. And there, at the gate of heavenly peace in Peking, stood Mao Zedong. On October 1st, 1949, he proclaimed the People's Republic of China. For help in building Chinese socialism, Mao turned to Moscow, his first trip abroad. The Russians had done little to help him gain power. To Stalin, Mao was as much a rival as an ally. It took 9 weeks for them to agree on a treaty of friendship, and 10 years for the world to realize that it wouldn't last. And by 1950, China's relations with the United States were frozen in hostility. The available evidence points to Russia as the instigator of the North Korean invasion of South Korea, a war that Mao apparently neither started nor wanted. Mutual fear and suspicion increasingly dominated China's relations with the world. In 1964, the Chinese exploded their first atomic bomb. From his perspective, Mao saw threats from both east and west. Russian troops at his northern border, American troops spread throughout Asia and fighting in Vietnam. At home, Mao had begun to rebuild and reorganize a nation disrupted by war for almost half a century. There was dramatic progress. The perennial problems of famine, flood, and disease were controlled or eliminated. There were social and economic reforms and the start of industrialization. There were also problems. Intense efforts to increase production, symbolized by the backyard steel furnaces of the Great Leap Forward. That production drive and subsequent crop failures caused serious economic difficulties and disagreement among Chinese leaders. In 1966, Mao dropped from public view for several months. He reappeared in this Chinese film of his now famous swim in the Yangtze River. Shortly thereafter, he returned to Peking to launch the Cultural Revolution. In a daring political gamble, Mao turned for support to China's youth and the army in a mass campaign against the very party establishment he had helped to create. There were excesses, times when the army had to restore order. Schools and factories were closed. Political careers were ruined. The Cultural Revolution was Mao's extraordinary attempt to block the emergence of a party bureaucracy which he felt had lost touch with the people, to keep alive the ideals of the revolution even after his death. By 1970, the turmoil had subsided, only to be followed in recent months by an equally confusing power struggle occasioned by the death of Zhou Enlai and Mao's own failing health. Before their deaths, one historic change did occur when Zhou welcomed a team of American ping pong players to Peking. The next year, 1972, Mao Zedong welcomed an American president and opened a new era in international politics. China's future leadership and direction of its revolution may be at issue in the months and years ahead. What is certain is Mao's place in history. He had firmly established China's power and position in the world. The dream is alive even after the dreamer is gone. Richard C. Hottelet, CBS News, New York.
Mao was a prolific poet, and quotations from Chairman Mao had become a mainstay of Chinese life. One of his last published works dealt with China's uncertain future. In that poem he wrote, "Loyal parents who sacrifice so much for the nation never fear the ultimate fate. Our mission unfinished may take 1,000 years.
My helper will show you two things to look for in a measuring tape. One, a positive lock. My Lufkin blade won't slip. Two, a shock absorber so the tip won't break off. My Lufkin has a patented bumper to help prevent that.
For us pros, it's Lufkin for accuracy.
For the best amateurs, too. Now, for a limited time, get a free metric tape with these Lufkin power tapes. Lufkin, one of the great family of tools from Cooper Industries.
I'd like you to take a close look at this bread. The color is light brown, and the texture, a unique blend of whole grain wheat and whole grain rye. There's bran, defatted flaxseed, and other nutritious ingredients, including pure golden honey. This isn't ordinary bread, it's Roman meal, the good-tasting light brown bread. Roman meal, natural whole grain goodness. The Roman Meal Company thought you'd like to know.
President Ford got his campaign on the road today, 11 blocks from the White House to a Washington hotel for a speech to the Convention of B'nai B'rith Jewish Organization. Bob Sheeper reports.
The president said he had planned a nonpartisan speech until he noticed in the newspaper what Jimmy Carter had told the group yesterday.
I was disappointed to see that one of your speakers yesterday apparently kicked off our debates from this rostrum. I guess he didn't want me to be present. Well, I got here as quickly as I could.
Then he launched a sharp attack on Carter's proposed spending cuts, taking strong exception to Carter's charge that the U.S. is following a cynical, immoral policy of worldwide arms sales.
I tell you, most of our arms sales and military aid goes to key countries like Israel and Iran. I assume he is not proposing to cut off Israel. Does Mr. Carter honestly consider his own country's bipartisan policies more cynical and less moral than the Soviet Union's?
It was the second day in a row Mr. Ford has made a direct response to Carter's charges. Aides expect more of the same tomorrow when he meets with Catholic officials. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, Washington.
Jimmy Carter, campaigning in Springfield, Illinois, had a quick response to President Ford's charge that Carter would weaken national defense by cutting military spending.
President Ford says there is no fat in the Pentagon budget, and I say there is. I believe that they've been there so long in Washington, bogged down in red tape, shuffling papers, approving budgets automatically, letting the Defense Department duplicate things that civilian agencies do, that just a few $1 billion in waste doesn't bother them anymore.
Earlier today in Columbus, Ohio, Carter said Mr. Ford had tried deliberately to cloud the issue when he linked FBI Director Clarence Kelly's acceptance of curtain valances with Mrs. Kelly's terminal cancer. The president had accused Carter of a lack of compassion. Carter said, of course, he sympathized with any man who'd lost his wife from cancer, but he noted Kelly's plan to remarry, and then he added, quote, apparently he's found a new loved one. The CBS News New York Times latest survey of voters conducted last week shows that Jimmy Carter's lead over President Ford has shrunk. Once an almost 2-to-1 spread, the Carter lead now is 4-to-3. More on the survey from David Culhane.
Beginning last March, our polls showed President Ford with a clear lead over all of his opponents. Then, during the primary elections, Jimmy Carter began to inch ahead. As he emerged as the Democratic winner, he pulled in front of President Ford. By June, Carter was ahead by a wide margin. Then came Mr. Ford's victory over Ronald Reagan and his personal success at the Republican convention. Now Carter is still comfortably ahead, but he is losing some of his earlier support. In the first polls, 1 out of 5 of those questioned were undecided. Carter was still relatively unknown. But by June, most people seemed to have made up their minds. Now the voters appear to be reassessing Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter, especially voters who earlier backed unsuccessful candidates. Once again, 1 out of 5 of those questioned is undecided. The poll shows that the Republican convention did improve Mr. Ford's position with the voters, but the Democratic convention helped Jimmy Carter even more. And the poll shows that most of the voters who supported Ronald Reagan have now changed their allegiance to Mr. Ford. But significant numbers have gone over to Carter, and almost 1/4 of them have yet to make up their minds. In comparing the latest poll with the one from June, it now appears that more people are beginning to think of Carter as a liberal, and fewer consider him a conservative. The change is not dramatic, but there is a drift in that direction. As to how the voters perceive the candidates, both men generally get high marks for honesty and integrity and for ability and competence. But in the area of experience, those questioned gave higher marks to Mr. Ford than to Jimmy Carter. In that same vein, those questioned feel that Mr. Ford is more likely to do a better job in handling foreign relations. As to the key area of the economy, the poll shows that slightly more voters think Carter would do a better job than President Ford. On the other hand, more voters approve of the way the president is currently handling the economy than disapprove. As to the other issues, most of those questioned think that the federal government should guarantee a job for everyone who wants to work. They are split about whether Watergate should influence how they vote in this election. And a majority of those questioned did not want to change the Constitution to make abortions illegal. Even Catholic voters took that position. In sum, the voters are still uncertain about a number of things, including the economy and what kind of president Jimmy Carter would be. So the upcoming debates could have great impact for voters who have not yet made up their minds. David Culhane, CBS News, New York.
This latest survey involves 1,703 registered voters interviewed by telephone. The potential sampling error in such a poll is plus or minus 3 percentage points. Alabama Governor George Wallace has confirmed that his bedroom telephone was tapped without his knowledge. Wallace said it was not politics, but a domestic matter between himself and his wife Cornelia. He refused to elaborate. Mrs. Wallace refused to talk about it. There have been recurring rumors of marital difficulties between the Wallaces.
It doesn't cramp my style.
It doesn't cramp my style.
What doesn't cramp my style? Phillips, milk of magnesia. When I have constipation,
I rely on Philips. It really works, and it doesn't interfere with my day.
Philips formula works a special way that draws your natural body water to where it's needed to soften gently and work effectively. Relieves constipation in hours, usually without cramps. Philips, regular, chocolate, or mint.
It really works, and it doesn't cramp your style.
The exciting new Radio Shack catalog is ready now. Get it free at your nearest store.
See what's really new in home electronics in this world-famous book of exclusive Radio Shack products. 164 pages of realistic stereo components, tape recorders, antennas, hobby kits, and our popular line of realistic CB radios and accessories. Get your new catalog today. Only at Radio Shack, a Tandy company.
The House and Senate voted today to impose a binding limit about $413 billion on the money Congress will appropriate next year. The budget resolutions, which are slightly different and will have to be reconciled, are about $14 billion higher than President Ford's proposed budget and entail a deficit of about $50 billion. Lockheed Aircraft has had to promise not to make any more payoffs to foreign officials in order to retain its $250 million federal loan guarantee program. The administration said any more such improper payments would be cause for default, and Lockheed agreed not to make any. A congressional conference is nearing completion of a major tax revision bill. Mariah McLaughlin has the details.
The final package picks up about $1.5 billion in tax revenues. It will include a temporary extension of those 1975 tax cuts till December 31st, 1977. A permanent standard deduction of $1,700 for individuals and $2,100 for marrieds. Liberalized child care provisions allowing a tax credit of up to $800 for working parents. Tightened provisions pertaining to Americans working abroad and American corporations which do business abroad. Limited tax deductions for an office at home, and it does not include any of those proposed tax credits for energy-saving devices. The main fight has been about tax shelters. The House version was aimed at those individuals and corporations which deliberately invest in losing propositions to gain tax relief. The Senate approach proved more acceptable. It restricts the use of some shelters, but emphasizes the minimum tax, which assures wealthy individuals and corporations pay at least some taxes, no matter what tax breaks they use. And finally, the conferees agreed to allow people to pass on more tax-free money to their heirs by more than doubling the present $60,000 exemption. All these provisions will apply to this year's tax return. Mariah McLaughlin, CBS News, Washington.
A cancer researcher from Tokyo says that since the Japanese started drinking milk in large quantities in the 1950s, the rate of stomach cancer deaths in Japan has dropped by 1/3. And he told a New York conference on the origins of cancer the lowest stomach cancer rates were among people who drank 2 glasses of milk a day and did not smoke. The Dow Jones Industrials went down again today, this time more than 6 points. Volume on the New York Stock Exchange was 16,500,000 shares. The average price per share fell 18 cents on the New York Exchange. It rose 2 cents on the American.
Acid indigestion sufferers? All antacids are not alike. Digel is different. This animation illustrates how trapped gas often churns up with excess stomach acid. Plain antacids have nothing to relieve this problem. But Digel is different. It adds a special anti-gas medicine to its soothing antacids. The Digel difference works fast to help break up trapped gas and relieve acid indigestion misery. For more complete relief, get the Digel difference.
Someday, Kowalski, they're going to make a pickup truck out of these cheap machines. And when they do, it's going to be the sweetest pickup in the world.
Sarge, look! Extra heavy-duty everything. And high ground clearance so it can handle almost any terrain. Sarge! You know why, Kowalski? Because it's all cheap four-wheel drive from the ground up. Know what I mean?
Sarge, look! Bikes in the back.
Well, sure. I'm entitled to a day off, ain't I?
South Africa had one of its most violent days today since racial unrest erupted 12 weeks ago. Trouble was reported in several cities and towns, but the worst was in Cape Town. There, government police killed at least 13 persons, including an 8-year-old boy, during a wave of arson and looting. In his commentary tonight, Eric Severide reflects on Mao's life and the impact he had on world events.
Mao was one of the titans, and not merely of this century. He ranks with Caesar, with Bonaparte, with Cromwell, with Hitler, Gandhi, and Lenin as mover and shaker. For a half-century, he was a prime mover in the reorganization of daily life and thought for more human beings than any other revolutionary ever worked upon. What will happen now in China? American diplomatic authorities have no idea, the people of China have no idea, and pretty certainly the leaders of China have no idea. So deep the division between those who, like Mao, want to continuously regenerated egalitarian revolution and those who want to build order, a powerful state, a modern industrial society. The cult of personality surrounding Mao was so strongly developed, the reverence for him so close to a religion, that he cannot be replaced. And there appears no one in the leadership with his sheer willpower, which had the effect upon others of some elemental force of nature. Some changes in foreign policy are possible, including diminution of the hostility towards Russia, but not, by the first official guess here, to the point of risking the American connection. Mao seems to have been the only chief of a great state to have deliberately started a rebellion in the streets against his own regime, as he did with the Cultural Revolution of the late 60s. He seemed not to wish to institutionalize socialism, as in Russia, but to institutionalize a process of socialist revolution. He thought bureaucracy would lead not only to a new Mandarin class, but to some form of capitalism. Americans think the opposite, that it leads to socialism. In a way, he was a romantic. He wanted perpetual resurrection of the egalitarian, Spartan, idealistic spirit of his exile days in the Yunnan caves. He wanted 800 million people to live that way forever. Egalitarianism may be possible in an agricultural society, which China mostly is, but not in a technological society where the tasks become complex, as Russia discovered, and where people are differentiated by natural ability and paid and treated differently. Mao thought he could avoid that. He would create a new human nature, Mao man, as the Russians used to talk of Soviet man. Man would be born again by his version of a worldly religion. But China remains China. As one of the wisest of the American old China hands, John Davies, wrote, the Western businessmen, missionaries, and educators who tried to modernize and Christianize China failed. The Japanese militarists who tried to conquer it failed. The American government which tried to democratize and unify it failed. The Soviet rulers who tried to insinuate control over it failed. Chiang failed. Mao failed.
That's the news this Thursday night. I'm Roger Mudd, CBS News. Good night.
Now that you've had a drink, oh, what a time to think.
Wow, I could have had a V8.
With just one sip to go, that's the wrong time to know.
Wow, I could have had a V8.
V8 Cocktail Vegetable Juice is a healthful blend of 8 garden vegetables that taste terrific and is naturally low in calories. But remember, the time to think of having a V8 is before you've had something else.
Wow, I could have had a V8.
Oh, dear. Sarah's christening day and Godmother's arthritis kicks up.
Oh, no.
Had trouble buttoning her dress. Why now?
Take your Anacin. You'll feel better.
When even simple movement can cause pain, Adult Strength Anacin, with the pain reliever doctors recommend most for arthritis, brings more freedom of movement without pain, relieves minor arthritis pain and its stiffness for hours.
Sarah's happy.
So's her Godmother. Anacin is really something.
I know.
Adult Strength Anacin.
This has been the CBS Evening News with Roger Mudd substituting for Walter Cronkite. For the latest news early, watch the CBS Morning News with Hughes Rudd and Bruce Morton. Enjoy a magical animated movie that's all about life. It's called Everybody Rides the Carousel. So hop on tomorrow at 8, 7 Central on CBS.
Stay tuned for Eyewitness News next on Channel 5, WTVF, Nashville.
This seal means it's time for your Ford dealer's year-end clearance sale, when people are coming in for a great buy on a new 76 Pinto.
On TV, you've seen a Pinto Pony win acceleration tests, win passing tests, win hill climb tests against the Chevette, Datsun B210, and Toyota Corolla. So get a great buy on a 76 Pinto, or any of the other Ford cars and trucks, now during your Ford dealer's year-end clearance sale. Prices may never be this low again.